Hello and welcome to Branding Basics for Small Businesses. I'm your hostess, Jerry Hoth, and I'm in partnership with Greater Bandon Association, trying to connect businesses in the local Bandon area and help them tighten their branding. This section was held at an in-person workshop, but we're recording the session to try to help folks who were unable to attend. So this section is going over 6 P's of marketing: the promise, persona, promotion, positioning, price, and product. In the in-person workshop, we did a group brainstorm, what comes to mind when you hear the word branding. And a lot of people said logo, which is part of your brand, but we'll be going over even more about what branding really truly is and why it's important to your storytelling. I'm going to show a number of different brands, and just to kind of give you an idea and warm you up into how different brands interact with their consumers. So Harley Davidson is, kind of a gritty, independent. When you see the Harley Davidson brand, there's an image of a customer that comes to mind. A lot of times, kind of a strong-willed, independent, maybe burly. Definitely tends to be more masculine, and so just trying to kind of whet your appetite, get you thinking about what brands are about and how they're positioned in the marketplace. Huggies is a brand that, their logo is friendly and soft and kind, and the font that they use has a very soft, round font. Their messaging, "We got you, baby," is friendly and sweet, and so a very different vibe than Harley Davidson. The Dove brand I really love because it really speaks to all women that are about beauty and how you can be beautiful at any age, at any size, the color of your skin. None of that matters. It's really about the beauty from within. And Dove has done a really excellent job of branding to be inclusive of all different types of beauty. Nike is a very iconic brand. You see the swoosh. It stands alone. It doesn't have to. You can see here the word Nike doesn't exist in their branding. Pretty much, in most cases, they have such a following. All they need is the Nike swoosh, and sometimes they pair it with "Just Do It" because that's their tagline. That's very well known as well. I included the Rolex brand because it's really positioned as a very high-end brand and a luxury brand that you pay high dollar for. And so, the branding around that is very kind of exclusive, and their font and their logo mark with the crown has a very symbolic kind of prestigious look and feel. So what branding really is it defines and expresses a company's unique identity and encompasses its mission, values, and its unique narrative. Effective branding is really about consistently delivering on promises and creating an enduring image in the minds of your consumers. So again, branding, it's a bit woo-woo. Actually, it's very much about emotion and connection to your consumer, and really truly trying to meet them where they are and meet them where you can showcase your brand to them, and it's going to resonate. This first exercise is the brand promise. So, a brand promise, I like the term brand promise because it really is about promising to your consumer what you're going to deliver. Sometimes it's referred to as a value proposition, but it clearly communicates what you're offering, to who you're offering it, and the emotional benefit of what your offer brings to them. So, there's some contemplative questions that I'd like to have you ask about your business. So, number one, what does your business sell? For who is your business aimed to help? What are the functional benefits of your product or service? And then what are the emotional benefits? So work through that exercise. And then there's on the next page, there's a kind of shortcut. It's we help what audience do what thing so they can do what their benefit is. So there's a kind of a cheat sheet on the next slide that can help you drill that down. And the reason that you want this value proposition is because it's really going to be the guide to how you define your business and understanding who you're trying to market to and how you're going to connect with them. Exercise 2 is about brand positioning. This is a little bit more complicated, and it's really about trying to identify the 2 criteria that you are competing with others against. So, what are the 2 criteria that you feel best describe your brand? And you'll put criteria A on one axis and criteria B on the other axis. Then once you define what those 2 things are, on the opposite side, you will place the opposite of your criteria. And I'll show you an example on the next slide to try to help. But the idea is you use your 2 criteria. It will give you 4 different quadrants. And then you'll put your brand where you feel it best fits on the quadrant. And then you'll put your competitors on the same quadrants to show where are they at in comparison to you, and it will help you see where they are in the market, where you could have competitive advantage, how you can position your brand maybe differently. Maybe you're currently not positioning it the way that it should be in order to compete more fully. So it's really just kind of stepping back, looking at your brand objectively to see what is it that you're currently doing and then in comparison to others. And if you don't have, like, Bandon is very small, if you don't have a competitor in your space, look outside the area or look at Amazon, or if you're competing with a big box store like that in any way, if you're losing sales to the internet, use some of those other businesses to try to position and see where you're at in comparison. So this is the example that I mentioned. So you'll see that in this case, we're looking at cars. And so the criterion that was used was conservative versus sporty, for example, or criterion B was least expensive versus expensive. And so you can see the upper left quadrant is expensive and sporty. So you've got Porsche and BMW and Audi and Nissan, and the little dots are actually, in relation to how sporty or how expensive they are. So you can see at a glance, it allows you to see where your competitors are. And if you're truly trying to compete on conservative and least expensive, you're going to want to be down in the right lower quadrant. So you can see your competitors would be Honda, Chrysler, Ford, and Hyundai. And you want to see where do you position your business in comparison to the others. And then do you want to move up and to the right or up into the, or up further? So it just really gives you kind of a where the crow flies view of where you are in the marketplace. Exercise 3 is brand persona. So, a little bit about personas. Personas are meant to be examples of your target customer. And you may have multiple personas for your business. You may have segments of your business that are specific to a specific persona versus another persona. So, you can do as many personas as are needed to try to help you identify your target customer. This exercise, there's a space here for an image. A lot of businesses actually will use an image of a persona to give them some life. So it can be, you could even use an AI character if you wanted to, but you really want to take to personalize your persona in a way that you can almost speak to them. So you use them to test your business, your services, your products. It's just a really good way to understand your customer in a more meaningful way. So the thing you're going to do is you're going to name your persona, give them a gender, an age, what location are they, living in the country and in town, or, what is their education, what is their occupation. And these are, again, just meant to be kind of pie in the sky, perfect customer. What are the behaviors that they exhibit? So what kinds of shopping behaviors do they have? Do they have a lot of discretionary income? Things of that nature. And then what are their problems and their needs? So, how can your product or service satisfy your customers' problems or needs? And really think through what those are. What are their goals and dreams? And can your product or service help them achieve their goals and dreams? And then who are their key influencers? So what key influencers help the customer want to purchase your product or service? So are there things that are going to help them choose your product or service? And identifying those things can help you maybe remove barriers to purchase. So think about that and actually, I know a lot of people who put their personas up in their business so that they can remind themselves who their customer is and who they're trying to serve. I'm going to talk kind of briefly about products. Product is a whole other workshop all in and of itself. There's a lot that goes into that. But what I really want to focus on in this workshop is around how you're thinking about your purchase decisions. So when you design your product, what is it before, during, and after purchase? What is that experience like? So before purchase, how do you communicate what makes you better than your competitors? How can you showcase that? Have you trained, if you have staff, have you trained them on the customer experience that you want them to have with your customers? It's very important that when you're not in the room, that your business is being presented in the way that you want it to be presented. Is your product or service selection process easy to understand? So I would encourage you to take your product or service and kind of blow it up and imagine what it's like to be a customer and walk through the sales process. How many steps does it take to go from interest to purchase? And then can you reduce those steps? Can you improve those steps? Is there anything you can do to delight your customer in those steps? One thing is your pricing on your services clear? Is it clear? If customers have to ask a price, they're going to be turned off by that. Some people automatically will just walk away rather than ask, because if you have to ask for a price, then and the price is too high, it's going to be embarrassing to the person. So you really want to be clear about your pricing. Services can be a little bit different that way, because you may want to do some preloading of the value that you offer before you provide a price. But for products, more often than not, pricing needs to be clearly defined. That's one of my pet peeves in town. I've gone shopping at places and there's no clear pricing on something, and so I'm like, oh, I would like to have that coffee mug or that whatever, but I'm not going to ask what the prices. It should be clearly displayed, and then I'll know whether or not I'm willing to exchange my money for that product. Does your customer need approval of someone else before making the purchase? So if so, think through, how can you help convince the person making the buying decision about purchasing your product or service? So we'll move on to during a purchase. So when the moment the purchase decision is there and the person has decided, how can you make that transaction as smooth as possible? Again, make it as seamless as you can. Make sure you're offering ways to pay for their services and products in the most efficient and the best way possible. Are you offering many options for payment? Is there a way you can deliver some happiness and make them remember the purchase so that after they leave, there's something to remember you by? How can you delight them? What memory do you want your customers to have of your product or service? So just those things be thinking about. And then after the purchase, how can you ensure that your customer feels they've made the right choice? Do you have any after sales process to ensure they have an amazing onboarding experience with your product or service? Do you follow up? Is it appropriate? Do you follow up and say, I hope that you were happy with my product or service, and is there anything I could have done better? What can you do to encourage customers to refer business to you? Referral business is the very best marketing there is. So the more that if you can offer a discount, for instance, to somebody for referring you, or, just give them a shout out on social media or something like that, that will go a long way. And then again, have you trained your staff on the customer experience that you want your customers to have? I'm going to talk a little bit about pricing. Pricing is another area that could be a whole other workshop, but wanted to just touch on it to just kind of wet cement for your mind. So some common pricing strategies, there's cost plus pricing, which is a fixed markup added to the cost of producing a product or service. So there's the cost of service or product, and then you add the markup, 20% or whatever on top of it. Value-based pricing. Prices are set based on the perceived value to the customer rather than the cost to produce the product. There's competitive pricing, where prices are set by looking at what competitors are charging for similar products. And then there's penetration pricing, which is a low initial price to gain market share and attract customers. And then once there's penetration, then the price goes up. Most consumers aren't too thrilled with that one. And then also price skimming is another one. Like the high price is set for a new product and gradually lowered over time as the market evolves. It feels a little bait and switch, a couple of these. So I am a very ethical business person, and I worry about those two, too high of a price, too low of a price initially. For me personally, just doesn't feel right. So I am more prone to look at value-based or cost plus or competitive. And then premium pricing, that's a brand that charges higher prices to create the perception of luxury or high quality. And that's a very real thing. And in some cases, these businesses have a lot of research and development dollars that they have to invest in their products. So, it makes sense in those cases. So then how to choose the right strategy. You want to define your business goals. Like, what is your objective? Are you trying to maximize profit? Are you trying to increase market share or build brand awareness? What is it you're trying to do? That's number one. And then conduct some market analysis. Do some benchmarking, like what are other companies doing? Understand the market conditions, the consumer demand, and competitive, interest. And then understand your costs. So what does it actually cost to produce your product or service? And then what are your desired profit margins to ensure that your pricing's sustainable? And make sure you're considering all things when you're doing that, because there's the cost of your time, there's the cost of the brick and mortar if you're doing it that way, or the cost of your home office. So just be thinking about all the things that go into sustaining your business. And then know your target customer. So consider that your customers, what they're willing to pay and how they perceive the value of your product. then test and adjust. And I think this one's really important, that being prepared to test different price strategies, make adjustments based on how they perform in the market, and then use feedback from your customers. If you're listening to your customers, you are going to adjust over time. Nothing needs to stay the same. You can make adjustments over time. In this section, I'm going to talk a little bit about visual identity and the importance of the logo that you have, color palette, typography, and imagery, and most importantly, that you're using those things consistently so that there's brand awareness that's built into your product, and that people recognize it. There's automatic brand recognition anytime any of these things are seen. I wanted to share this brand identity guideline. This is one I actually developed for Zonta about 10 years ago. And it's just a one-page kind of snapshot. And I would say Zonta is a very complex kind of brand identity because they're trying to serve an international audience. And they have districts and clubs and a foundation. And so they have all these different types of variations on their logo. So it's a little complex, but I think it speaks to the ways in which you build your brand identity and then use it consistently. So you'll see there's approved color palette and the tints associated with those colors that are acceptable to use. And then the color standards chart actually breaks down the colors so that there are web-based colors, print-based colors, that are acceptable for them to use as well. And then there's typography. So a word about typography, it's really important to use typography that is clear and easy to read. Now logos sometimes can be a little bit more stylized, but when you're actually writing body copy, you really want the reader to be able to understand very easily what you're trying to say. And so I stay away from really excessively decorative or script fonts in text because it can make it really difficult for people to understand what you're trying to convey. The other thing I would say about fonts is that typography or fonts is that Google has free fonts available online, and there are many, many of them. I love fonts, and I have purchased many fonts over the years, but Google has a huge library. There's no reason to pay for a font unless you truly want to convey something in your logo. And then the other thing is imagery. What I would say about imagery is I would say, nearly vitally important for most businesses to have a library of curated photography that speaks to their brand. So it's an investment because hiring a professional photographer is not necessarily the cheapest thing, but really will pay in dividends by promoting your business in a very professional light. I would also say that having a really clear understanding of the different types of images that you want to capture before you hire a photographer is vitally important. So as a marketing director, when I hired a photographer, I would always have what we called a shot list. And that was just 20, 30 different images that I wanted to capture when the photographer was on location. So I would say, this person with this person talking over a cup of coffee, this person over this next to this person shaking hands, or whatever it was. Really detailed instructions for the photographer so that when you hire them, they're getting those shots for you, and then you're going to be able to use them in the way that you envision using them on your website, in social media, things like that. Exercise 3 is about brand personality. This one's really fun, I think, and it gives you a really quick snapshot of the type of brand that you are. So you'll see there's a scale on the left and a scale on the right. And then what I'd like you to do is to rank each of these scales either to the far, or either to the left or the right of the center. It could be in the center as well. But for instance, feminine, masculine. If I have, let's say, a fragrance soap brand, I'm probably going to skew more to the feminine than the masculine. With simple versus complex, it's probably a simple product. It's probably a simple sell. I'd say probably a 3 on that. Just go down through each of these scales and rank your brand, and it will help you know how you need to speak to your customer, and it will help you understand what type of customer you're trying to attract as well. Okay, we're going to talk about storytelling. So all of the activities that we've done up until now, so the brand personality, the brand personas, all of that, they're all kind of leading us to this idea of storytelling. So the idea is that the tighter that you have a connection to your target customer, the clearer your brand will be, and the more you will be able to find where your customers hang out and reach them. So storytelling is kind of the next layer where you're going to be able to talk to people about why your product or service is interesting, fun, whatever you're trying to convey. Storytelling is going to help you do that. So there's also a really good 10-step storytelling guide that is in the handouts as well, and that will help you kind of dig down into a deeper storytelling plan. But the most important thing I think about storytelling is just that is really how you build your brand. It's really how you connect to your customer and make it interesting to them to want to do business with you. So one of the things that we do in the workshop is we do a role play. We have one person sit in the role of the brand or the business, and then another person is the skeptical customer. And so the whole purpose of this exercise is to get the business or the brand thinking about what would be a barrier to a sale. What things might a skeptical customer ask to prevent a sale from occurring? And so it's a really fun exercise. Then we switch partners and have the skeptical customer serve as the brand person, and likewise. So I think what's really helpful about that, and if you were not able to attend the in-person session, I think you could have a role play like this with a family member or a friend. Just pair up, and it's really just to kind of get yourself comfortable with the idea that there will be people who don't want to buy your product or service because of a perception. Maybe it's too expensive, or maybe it's flippant. They think it's not important, or it's there's many things that people could say to be skeptical about your product or service, and you want to be able to defend your product or service in a way that can complete the sale, right? And I think it's important to say, it's not, your product or service is not for everyone, and so understanding who your product or service is not for is equally as important. And then I had as a title here, clarity, consistency, and constancy. I think with the brand, that's the most important thing, that we're consistent. Our brand voice is consistent. We're talking about ourselves in a consistent manner, and we're beating the drum, consistently, also very clearly around our messaging. What is it we're trying to sell? Who are we trying to sell to? What are the experiences that people have with our product or service, and why they should want to purchase our product or service for them? So at the end of the in-person session, we have a number of resources available in the packet that we wanted to offer for people, because it was just a 2-hour session, which is not very much time to cover all the things. So we had folks share an insight or a next step that they would take for their business. And then we talked through briefly about each of these 5 follow-up resources. So one is called Visual Mapping Your Origin Story. And this is an homework exercise for really walking through, why did you go into business? What are the steps around the business that have occurred? And then kind of planning and looking out for your vision for the future. So that one is, it takes some time. We didn't have time in a 2-hour session to do that work. So, and I think it takes concentrated time to think through. So would just encourage you to do that exercise. There's also an executive summary template, which is an exercise that kind of helps you write an executive summary of your business that could be used for your website, or for your LinkedIn page, or your social media page, that just kind of gives a very tight vision of what it is that you do. So that executive summary template's in there. There are some outreach and engagement opportunities references, which are basically like tons of different things that you could do to do outreach and to engage with your customer. And they're hopefully things that you might not have thought about. So is there something that you could do? Could you partner with a company? Have you thought of doing that? Can you sell your product in a packet with another product? There's just a lot of ways that you can look at what you're doing in a different, unique way. So that, and then we'll cover more of that in the second session, the brand tune-up session. There is also I mentioned this already, the 10-step storytelling pitch for maximum impact. It's really just kind of taking steps and breaking them down into a way to position a story and to make it interesting. And then there's some business essentials resources. So there's a number of things like it's very important to have, I think a website is vitally important. It can be just a one-page, what I would call a brochure website, which just gives the basics about your business, but it gives your business some credibility that you're actually in business. It also helps reduce the amount of times that you have to answer questions. So it's a way to point people to a resource that tells a snapshot about your business and leaves them wanting more. Then they can call and follow up with you for more information, or depending on whether you're a product or service. Let's see. There's information about business card printing, places like that. There's Canva, which is a graphic design site that you can use to build some templates for you to use in your social media or make flyers. There's all kinds of great resources on Canva that are free. I don't think I mentioned the stock photography websites. There is, if you have Adobe products, there's a stock photography available in Adobe products, and then also something called Unsplash, which is free photography. You just have to give credit to the photographer when you use their image, and things like that. So there's a number of different resources. The idea, again, is just to help. I think folks in small business are typically, trying to keep costs low, and so trying to give resources to people that they can self-market as much as possible. Kind of a parting word I would say about social media is that with social media, it's really important that you try to post regularly. So what works really well for me is I have on my calendar 3 days a week different types of social media posts that I'm going to do. So I'm an artist, so one day on Mondays, let's say I'll post something about my process, like what kind of product do I use, what kind of painting do I do, and then maybe I think on Wednesdays I post, inspiration, like what are the things that inspire me to paint, and then maybe on Fridays I'll post something like quotes or something, or book references. It doesn't have to be about your business. It can be about things that inspire you or things that you enjoy doing or historical things or educational things. It's really about engaging your audience, maybe teaching them a little bit more about you, because people really truly buy you as much as your product or service. They really want to know behind the scenes what you're about and how to engage with you. So anyway, I hope that you've enjoyed this. This was a really great, this is a love of mine, sharing helpful information to others. And, I hope that this will help you take some action to grow your business or meet your business goals.